And we are live. So I want to welcome everybody to our third official class in our social distance learning series. My name is Ed Gardner. I'm the executive director of the Liberal Gun Club. Tonight we have Alessandro Padovani. I was promising to say that with more of a flourish, but I'll let him do it himself. Teaching a class tonight on the fundamentals of, and we read the class thing, home defense with a firearm. This isn't necessarily a class for beginners, although he will cover some beginning material. Online with me as well, I've got Eric Myers, Scott Richardson, and Mike Ross, who are going to be moderating the chat. Those folks will be responding to your questions and getting them into Al's ears as we go. So as you go, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. When we find a good place to ask them, we're going to unmute ourselves and ask those questions. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Al, because we call him Al, because the rest of the name is far too complicated for us simple Americans to pronounce.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Ed. So today's class, we're gonna look at, the fundamental, the basics, on how to approach and set ourselves up for home defense with a firearm in this case. Incidentally, obviously in an hour time, it needs to be very condensed. So we're going to go over most of the principle and concept. And if you understand the principle and concept, then you can adapt them more easily to your situation, to your lifestyle, your house, and all of that. The fundamental of home defense with a firearm is part of two classes that we are setting up an instructor development for. We're going to bring online for the member of the Liberal Gun Club, the Defensive Firearm Coach Instructor Development. There's going to be a 3-day instructor development course. After you pass that course, you get certified to teach the fundamentals of home defense with a firearm and the fundamental of concealed carry. Also, if you successfully pass that class, it sets you up to then participate in the Intuitive Defensive Shooting Fundamentals. It's the 5-day defensive shooting instructor class that we teach with ICE training. Rob Pincus, Grant Cunningham, and so on. We're all part of that team. All right, so without further ado, first thing we're going to talk about is context, right? This is a home defense class for regular people like me and you. It's not a fantasy camp where we're going to don bulletproof vests and so on and go and clear houses, because that's not our job. That doesn't, the moment that you step out of a safe place to go and look for something, even from the legal standpoint, it's not necessarily a defensive engagement anymore. And so we really need to differentiate between what is fantasy and what it is a realistic expectation of what may happen to us, right? The context is an imminent threat of home invasion with the possibility of a lethal threat, right? The purpose of the class is to educate the students on what is the best firearm for home defense, how to better prepare it, so that it's ready to be accessed while remaining safe from unauthorized access. And the principle that we're going to follow in order to keep ourselves and our loved one as safe as possible, right? And talk about the context. We're going to talk about the strategy. So strategy is the plan that you make. So strategy, we have principle and concept. You need to adapt them to your own situation. The main points are evade, barricade, arm, communicate, and respond. We're going to look at those individually. For now, understand that these are obviously put in a list format, but it doesn't mean that you need to do them in this order, right? The 2 arrows signifies that. Forgive the low-tech presentation. That's the best that I can do for now. But basically, right?
If you can't do us a favor and move just a wee bit closer to the mic. Sure.
So if we look at the first one, we're trying to evade. We're trying to get away from the bad guy. We try to put ourselves away from danger, right? We can also arm ourselves in the same time. We can also be communicating with 911 as we are going about escaping the premises. And it goes the same way for everything else. We may not be able to evade, so we need to barricade in a safe room, right? As we are barricading, we can still communicate, we can still arm ourselves, and we can respond as, you know, as the need arises. So let's look at these one by one, right? So evade, obviously, like let's say it's a classic, you know, scenario is me and my wife, we gotta sleep. We hear a big noise, you know, window crashing, a door breaking, you know, something like that. If our house where we are and so on allow us to get out of there, right? That would probably be this most prudent course of action, right? We remove ourselves from danger. Now, obviously, we understand that that's not always possible, right? This context, me and my wife, we don't have kids and so on. So if you have kids, it may be a lot different, right? So the next step would be to barricade, right? So let's again talk about a situation when there is not kids or guests in your house present, right? So just one or two people. So we need to first, you know, get up, lock the door, right, to the bedroom, and then we need to arm ourselves. After we are armed ourselves, as we move to a position of advantage that we'll discuss in a little bit, we need to start communicating with 911, right? And we need to tell 911 very specific information. The quicker we give that information, the quicker they can send law enforcement and paramedic to our place. Communicate. So the communication is important. It's between you and your partner, and it's between you and 911. And eventually, when the police shows up, it's going to be between you and the law enforcement officer, right? Respond. Obviously, the response stands for, like, you know, the respond with your firearm. We do that as needed, as necessary, right? So we want to limit, particularly from a point of view of legal, you know, lawsuits and all that stuff, you know, using the firearm should be the last things that you end up doing that you want to do. Like, it's the thing that you do if there's no other avenue at your disposal, right? So it's important to understand also what happened in the aftermath, right? So now I heard the noise. I tell my wife, babe, call 911. I'm going to get my weapon out. We're going to get in a position of advantage. The door is locked. Now we're on 911. The bad guy doesn't stop at the door, kicks the bedroom door in, comes in. I need to engage, right? After I engage the bad guy, when the police shows up, even before the police shows up, what I don't want to do is I don't want to touch the bad guy. I don't want to move him around. I don't want to, like, you know, give him help. I don't have any duty to help him out, to patch him up, right? I don't want to move the evidence, right? I don't want to kick his gun out of the room because now the gun is over there. So he came into your room unarmed, right? So we need to be really paying attention to those little details, right? You want to keep communicating with 911 because if you have to engage the bad guy, it means that the cops are not there yet, but they're going to get there, right? So you're going to communicate with 911. You may want to ask them, you know, what do I do now? What do I do when the police shows up, right? Because obviously you don't want to be, you know, going to meet the cops while you're still carrying your firearms, right? They don't know you, right? So that you don't want to give them an opportunity to mistake you for the bad guy. The other thing is that when the police arrive on scene, now they're finally here. 911 may tell you the police is 2 minutes away. They're 1 minute away. They're there. Can you see the light? Can you hear the siren, right? You may say, yes, I see the lights. They're outside. You know, now, if you know that there's nobody else, no other bad guy in the house, right? It's a lot easier, but you don't really know that, right? Because you haven't gone to look for the bad guys. You're still barricaded in your room. The only difference is that the door to your bedroom was kicked in by the bad guy and you took care of that problem. So, you know, you may want to tell 911 to tell the cops when they come up to the door, to your bedroom door, to say a specific code word, right? It may be the name of your, you know, pet, of your daughter, of your, you know, whatever, right? But have a way to communicate to make sure that it's the cops coming in, right? Now, obviously, when the cops are coming in, you don't want to still be there pointing the gun at that door, right? So you may want to make sure that once the law enforcement are on premises, you secure your gun, right? If you took it out of a safe, you may want to put it back in that safe. At the very least, you may want to remove the magazine, lock the slide open, put it on the bed, right? So when the cops comes in, they have one less thing to worry about. and there is one less opportunity to make a tragic mistake. Comply with orders. I know, it's your private property, it's your home, and whatever else, but when the cops show up, they want to go home safe as well. So they will err on the side of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Caution.
Caution. Thank you very much. On the side of caution. So if they tell you, get on your knees, put the gun down, put your hands up, you do what they tell you to do. Because you know what? You can argue about it later, but don't raise the intensity of the situation. Don't raise the stress of the situation when there is weapon, present. So you may want to really think about that, right? It's your home. You're inside your home. But if you comply with the lawful order of the police, you diminish the opportunity for a tragic event to happen, right? They're going to ask you what happened. They're going to ask you for what was the problem, how you took care of it, right? Now, remember that after a stressful event like that, particularly with the way that the brain forms memories under stress, right? There's going to be a disconnect. We're going to have some holes in our recollection of event. So it behooves us to explain what happened, but not really get into the specific or your actions, right? The guy broke into the door. We barricade ourselves, call 911, and when the guy broke through, after I told him that I was on the phone with 911, the police was coming and so on. He was armed. I had to engage him to stop the threat, right? Leave it at that. Don't get into many specifics, because sometimes when we don't remember at the moment what we did, we want to fill in the lack with something, right? Because we don't want to appear like we're trying to hide something or not. So it's really important to understand the dynamics of what happens after a shooting event, right? As a matter of fact, law enforcement officers have 48 hours before they need to give an official statement about a officer involved shooting, right? So we can.
Hey, Al, quick question is that may just be consistent with California law. So I don't know if that's
No,
necessarily.
I think that I have law enforcement friends throughout the country, and it's kind of like a policy that they have a certain amount of time before they need to give a official statement. It could vary state by state, right? But what the point of that is, if law enforcement know that, you may be in a state of shock, you may, we just engaged a person, we just, took the life of a person. So the emotional shock, the emotional upheaval is gonna affect the way that you speak, the way that you recall things. And so the advice is, describe the least amount of the event, so that you don't appear like you have something to hide, but you also don't start blabbering and just say things that can be used against you, just because you're in that heightened emotional state, right? The easiest thing to do is like, sir, officer, he came in, I had to engage him, I had to stop him, and frankly, right now, I'm in shock. I don't even know my name. I don't know. I need to sit down. Can you call the EMT, please? And that's, like what law enforcement are going to do. They're going to call the EMT, they're going to sit down, and so on and so forth, right? And it's not because you have anything to hide. It's because we understand the emotional effect on memory that this sort of event have, right? So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, if you pardon the pun, after you just shot the bad guy. You can point to evidence of threat, right? Oh, the guy broke in, I had to engage him. If you can tell over there is a knife, there is the gun, there is the hammer. Injuries, if you have any injuries, like maybe the guy came in and was able to, to let a round or two go, you may be wounded. Some of your, your partner may be wounded, right? So you want to point out those things. If the bad guy has issued any verbal threats, as he's banging on the door, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to come in, I'm going to rape you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So those are things that may be beneficial for you to point out to law enforcement. And finally, if there is any witnesses, or if you have any security cameras that have filmed what went on.
Hey, Al, can I interrupt just one more
Sure.
second? So obviously none of this is actually legal advice. Al's not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. But
Mhm.
this comes from a wealth of material that both Al and other instructors in that community have been drawing from, including, I believe, Masad Ayub's material. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, it's not legal advice because I'm not telling you when to shoot or when not to shoot. This is just advice on how to dialogue with the police once they show up, right? So none of these represent legal advice in and of itself. To begin with, the disclaimer help us as well, right? It is kind of a behavioral advice, if that makes sense. All right, so if we have any more question on this, we'll move quickly to selection, right? So we talk about home defense with a firearm. So how do we select a proper firearm that you know that may give us a slight advantage, right? So when we talk to students and so on, the basic for which gun we suggest are based on some concept of objective efficiency, right? Now, let's talk about the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. So effectiveness means achieving your goal, right? Efficiency means achieving your goal with the least amount of effort, time, or energy. Now, if our goal is to stop the threat, obviously, if I can do it with the least amount of time, effort, and energy, I give myself an advantage, right? So in this case, we look at pretty much striker fire as the best gun for self-defense because it has a lower bore axis than most guns with a hammer. There is a consistent trigger press, like it's a medium weight and it's consistent. There's no single action, double action, and all that jazz. Usually they have a higher capacity for being manipulated efficiently because I don't have to worry about any external commands, right? I don't have to disengage the safety. I don't have to worry about cocking, decocking. I don't have to worry about my first round being a long pull and my second round being a shorter pull, right? So it becomes more consistent. Consistency, doing the same thing in the same way in the same space, is a big factor in efficiency, right? Because it takes away a lot of variables. So these guns are not just more efficient during the context of a dynamic critical incident when I need to use them to defend myself, but also in training, I have to devote less resources to all these variables, right? And so I can focus my training and get more bang for my buck. Ergonomics are subjective, right? Within the striker fire, guns, you may like one may fit your hand better than another, right? So there's a subjective thing that you need to figure out for yourself. One thing to consider is not just how well it feels in your hand, but also can you manipulate the commands of the gun with your strong hand only. Particularly in the case of own defense, particularly if you have loved ones, particularly if you have kids, right? I may be holding my gun with my strong hand because I'm holding my kids or my partner behind me or against something, right? So I need to be able to manipulate that gun, trigger, magazine release, and so on with my strong hand only, if possible. Another consideration is cost. Cost is another consideration that is subjective, right? You may choose to invest as many financial resources as you can or as you want into a firearm. And so within the striker fire handguns, you know, prices are not that, there's not such a big variable, but you may go from like, you know, 450 to 700. And right now, a couple of companies are coming out with really good so far from the feedback. Firearms that are around 350, like Stoger has one out, Palmetto Harmony is coming out with another one. So, you know, there is like the financial shouldn't be a limiting factor for most people. Now, once we select the gun that works best for us, right, we need to select the ammo, right? Now, we have two kinds of ammo. We have both, full metal jacket, so bolt ammo, right? And we have hollow points. And we have a couple of different hollow points, bonded or jacketed. Now, Ball ammo is really good for training because usually it costs less, right? So you can train, you can practice without breaking the bank. The disadvantage of ball ammo for defense in general and for home defense in particular is that because it's a full metal jacket bullet, it's gonna have issues with over-penetration, right? Particularly if you only have, sheetrock walls, right? So I live in a very small house. My neighbor, it's right there, right? So if I were to engage a bad guy with ball ammo, I may hit the bad guy, it may go through the bad guy, go through the wall and keep traveling, right? So we're responsible for each shot that we fire from beginning to end, right? So if we have a better option than ball ammo for defense, we should take it. And here's where the hollow point bullet come into play. Basically, the hollow points are such that there is a hollow in the point, hence the name. And what happens is that once the bullet hits the target, it starts to open up. And by opening up, it slows down tremendously, transfer the kinetic energy into the threat, and it has a much lower opportunity for over travel, penetrating that person and keep on traveling. So they're a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, if you have to use it in self-defense, you stand a much higher chance to only engage the bad guy and only damage the bad guy instead of running the risk of damaging the bad guy and somebody else down the road. So it's definitely the choice to get for defensive use. Now on the caliber, right? Both with the striker fire and with the caliber, we're gonna have people like, maybe having questions, maybe, having personal preferences, right? I understand that. Remember, if it's a personal preference that you cannot back with, science, research, and logic, it remains a personal preference. And with, all the less optimal factors of that. So the caliber that we suggest is 9x19, so 9mm, right? The advantage of the caliber is that now with the advances in modern defensive ammunition, with the hollow point, particularly the bonded hollow point, we see a very little difference between calibers on the effect on a target, right? Mostly is where you put that bullet that is going to make a difference. It's not the bullet size. So 9mm has the best balance between effectiveness of damage on target and recoil management, right? We don't know how many rounds it's going to take to stop a threat. Particular threat that it may be in your home, may be high, may be drunk, and if they are committed to hurt you so much so that they're going to break through, kick in your bedroom door, they're probably pretty committed. So we don't know if it's going to take 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. So my goal is to shoot an accurate string of fire, right? And by having a 9mm, I can put more rounds on target in a shorter amount of time because the recoil is easier to manage. Most guns most guns magazine will have more, pardon me, let me try that again. You have a higher capacity per gun if the 9mm instead of 40, 45 or whatever, right? So you have more rounds in the gun, you have more opportunity to stop the threat, particularly now maybe we have multiple threats, right? And cost, again, it's another big factor for most people, right? Both on the hollow point, defensive ammo, and in the training ammo. I can usually find 1,000 rounds of 9mm for $200, right? So I can train quite a bit with that. 40, 45, you're gonna go up a third and even almost double. So
there's a question, if I may, really quick. If self-defense hollow points are not available for whatever reason, maybe they're not allowed, or if the availability is low, is there an appropriate alternative?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know that nowadays in the States, they're not allowed. Like I know, for instance, like San Francisco, they say they're not allowed, but actually they allow the same hollow point that the police uses. So there is, to my knowledge, they're not prohibited anywhere. There might be, right now, if you try to order hollow. Yes?
I believe they're illegal in New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, yeah. So if that's the case, right? If you have to do ball ammo, you have to do ball ammo, you know, but understand the consideration, understand the limitation, and we'll talk about maybe setting your safe room up with a safe backstop from the entrance, right? And we'll talk about it in a second. So that, you know, you may have a bookcase, you know, full of books behind, you know, the point of entry of the bad guy, so that if you need to engage the bad guy, now any bullet that goes past him may get stopped by the books, right? They're really good at stopping bullets. You know, they're not just good for learning and such. So if you cannot get all the point because of legal reason, you have to do with ball ammo. You need to understand the limitation of it, right? In that case, I may consider a 20 gauge shotgun, you know, with buckshot, so that I mitigate the problematics of overpenetration. Again, then we have an issue with long guns in the house, because obviously they're a lot harder to maneuver, and you know, if I have small ones and so on, they're harder to keep, you know, and keep steady with one arm. So there is pros and cons for pretty much everything. Any more questions on these?
No, we can go ahead and move on. There were a number of questions about frangible that I think we covered in chat. You know, this isn't a rifle class, so we're not talking about carbines and 223. So, yep, you're all set. Go.
All right, here we go. So now we have selected our handgun, we have selected our ammo, right? We need to understand, you know, the difference between storing a firearm or staging a firearm, right? So when we talk about storing, it's keeping the firearm so it's secure from an unauthorized access or malicious use, right? So most people have most of their guns in, you know, in their big or small safe, right, depending. And so, you know, they may have them there. Again, the legality in some state and so on, you may have to have it separate from ammunition. You may have it, you know, in Italy, they were trying to make it so that you would have to have the gun disassembled, you know. Luckily, that didn't go through. But anyway, so depending on your collection, if you will, you know, you may have a big or a small safe. You may have your safe in the basement, in your you know, in your garage or whatever. So they're safe from an unauthorized access, but they're not really easy to get to, right, in the time of need. So that's why we talk about staging. Staging is you know, means taking appropriate steps to prevent an unauthorized access while allowing an efficient use of the gun when needed, right? So when we talk about staging, you know, we can also have a few variables given our own context, right? If you live alone, if you live just with your partner, if you have kids, if your kids have friends that come out and hang out, right? So if you have roommates, so there are all different situations that affect how you want to stage your handgun, right? You can stage your gun in plain view, particularly if you live by yourself. We don't really advise that, because if you see the gun, bad guy sees the gun, burglars get a lot of guns out of lawful, you know, citizen just by burglarizing home and picking guns, you know, that are left unsecured, right? So it's not ideal, but that's an option. You can hide it, but, you know, unsecure. So you can hide it under, you know, in a drawer. You can hide it, you know, in the bookshelf. You can do something like that. Again, particularly if it's just you or your partner, I don't have much of an issue with that, right? Probably still not the most civic-minded way to keep a gun. Now, you can keep it in a secure container. Again, we go back to the big safe that you may have, but now there is a lot of reputable companies that make small, quick access safe. You can bolt them to your, you know, under your bed. You can bolt them in your bedside table. You can have them in your wardrobe, you know. So those are like, you know, this is a quick example. You know, this is a very small one. It comes with a cable that you can actually secure to something. You have ones that are, they have a combination. They have one with fingerprint recognition, right? This is the one that I take traveling as well. So it's got a combo, and then you got to open it, right? And that's where your firearm is. So obviously our advice, always, again, errs on the side of caution, right? Particularly with the new one where they have fingerprint recognition, you can wear a bracelet, you have a little, little different things that make accessing the handgun really quite fast. I don't really see the point of leaving a gun unsecure around your house. Now, you may, have exhausted your financial resources in getting that gun, so you don't have an extra $100, $200 to get a quick access safe. You could keep it in the gun storage case with a lock, right? And again, the quicker you can get that lock open, the better it is. I like combination locks, and I may leave it set up so that I just move a couple of the numbers so I can access it a little bit quicker, right? But that's up to you. Another option is clandestine staging. So everybody might be familiar with tactical walls. So this is a company that specializes in having hidden compartment for firearms in everyday furniture, right? Coffee tables, mirror, what have you, right? So if you have resources, that's a really good way to stage your weapons, maybe even in multiple rooms in the house where they're secure and they're actually out of view from everybody. One little consideration, when you're staging your weapon, right, consider staging a belt with an holster nearby, right? I don't know how anybody sleeps. I don't want to know, but if you're sleeping in a pajama, still, you're taking care of the bad guy. Now you have to make sure that the cops are coming or whatnot. If you can put it in a holster, there you go. It's safe, right? If you have to, fix yourself because you got shot or you got hurt, or a loved one got shot or hurt, you don't want to put a loaded gun anywhere because, again, you're not 100% sure that your house is free of bad guys now, right? So if you have a holster nearby, it's going to be the quickest and the easiest way to be able to make the gun safe again. Particularly, let's say now you have kids. So now if you have kids, you need to make a plan and you need to figure out where your safe room is. Is your safe room your bedroom, your wife's bedroom, your partner's bedroom, right? And then you have to get up, get armed, and move to the kids' room with a gun in your hand? Are you confident with that? You have that level of training where your kids may be spooked and they start running, right? So there's a lot of potential for an accident to happen. If I have my belt with a holster staged by the gun, open the quick safe, put the belt on, gun in the holster as I'm going to my kids' room, that would prevent a lot of opportunity for a terrible accident to happen. Right? So these are things that you need to consider, particularly for your own context and situation. Another option, if it's, right, and you have a quick access safe, you may want to stage a quick access safe with a weapon in your kid's room. I know that might be a little controversial, but if you, look at it logically, right, it's a safe. Right? Your kids shouldn't be able to access that safe even if it's in their room. If they can access the safe in their room, you may have different problems than safe, secure gun storage. Now, apart from the poor joke there, again, if it's in a safe, it's safe. You can keep it in the kid's room. You can get there, barricade into your kid's room, communicate, arm, get your kids behind it, get your partner behind it, and now you have limited the opportunity for a negligent discharge or for a terrible accident to happen. Oh yeah. Now, when we stage the gun, how do we stage it? There's a couple of different conditions, right? We can stage it unloaded, meaning the gun is, there's no round in the chamber, there's a full magazine next to the gun. Right? So when we access the gun, we grab the gun, load the magazine, rack the slide, and now the gun is loaded and ready to be used. We can also stage it loaded, meaning magazine, full magazine in, round in the chamber. If I stage it loaded, it's imperative that the trigger guard needs to be covered. So when I stage it loaded, I want to have a holster. I want to have the gun in the holster. Just to give you a quick example, right? I usually Obviously the gun, as you can see, there is a unloaded chamber indicator that comes from the chamber to here, so we know that the gun is unloaded. There is a magazine. You can see that the magazine is unloaded, right? But still, when I stage my gun loaded, I stage it with this little trigger guard cover, right? And what happens? I grab the gun, pull it. Now the gun is ready to be used, right? But I didn't run the risk to access the trigger and the trigger guard as I go to grab the gun and have an accident discharge when I really don't need it. Oops. And I'm back. Now, I could also stage it with a fully loaded magazine in the gun, but no round in the chamber, right? So I would grab it, rack the round, and I'm good to go. Now, whatever method you choose, you need to be consistent, right? It needs to be the same all of the time, right? But it's really easy to get mixed up. And now I don't know if the gun is loaded and I didn't have it in a holster because I usually keep it, unchambered and all of that, right? So make sure that once you decide what works best for you, you keep it consistent.
Hey, Al, just a quick question for the audience. That chamber flag, does that actually show that the gun is safe? So it just shows it coming out the front of the barrel. So we got some snarky butts in the.
So if it comes out, sure thing.
What is it? Puts it in battery.
See that?
There you go. Okay, everybody's snarky on the chat.
In.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. I think we just shut them up.
Oh, that's all right. Hey, better safe than sorry, right? I'm a human being that makes mistakes and quite a few. So I really appreciate you guys keeping me accountable for everything.
Because we know we don't want to be one less safe,
Exactly. All right. So now with this beautiful example of Italian art, we're going to talk about how to set ourselves up. What we consider a position of advantage in any given room, right? So when we set ourselves up, we want to get to 90 degrees to the point of entry. So let's say this is your bed. You got a little bedside table here, bedside table. You got a little wardrobe thing here, there, and there, right? And this is the door to the bedroom. So obviously, I want to be here, 90 degrees to the door, because what happens? Imagine somebody is going to crash through your door, right? When they crash through the door, the first thing they're going to be looking, their field of view is going to be forward. If you can imagine, you're at 90 degrees to the door. So you're over there, and I'm breaking into your bedroom, and I'm here, right? As I'm looking around to figure out where you're at, you already have the drop on me, right? So if you need to engage, if you need to respond with a firearm, it's going to be a lot more advantageous for you because you have that fraction of a second where the bad guy doesn't see you, but you see him, right? So that's why here is way better than being here, 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 or there, right? Now, remember when we mentioned consideration if whether you can use hollow point or whether you're limited. If this is the point of entry, I know where the bad guy is going to come in. I may want to put my bookshelf right here, right? So that any shot that doesn't get the bad guy or that goes through the bad guy gets stopped by the bookshelf, right? And that's totally up to you, but that's something to consider, right? Particularly, let's say that if you have your guest room here, you have it goes to the if you're in an apartment complex. There is a lot of consideration where, always, setting yourself up for success makes a lot of sense. Now, ideally, right, you got the first person, if it's just you, you need to be armed and on the phone at the same time. So luckily, you can put the phone on speaker, put it down somewhere, it's going to pick up your voice, going to pick up sounds and so on. And now you can still have a two-handed grip in case you need to engage the bad guy, right? If it's you and your partner, it makes sense that one person is on weapon and the other person is on communication, right? So we don't have to walk and chew gum if you don't need to. Again, this would be the same if you have to go to your kids' room, right? You need to figure out, once you're in your kids' room, you lock the door, you have yourself, your partner, your kids behind you, and 90 degrees to the door, to the point of entry. All right, so any questions so far?
Yeah, actually, I think this is a good time to actually have this conversation because there was a question on the chat around the advice around striker fired guns, which was, I know, was like 3 slides ago. But when you're talking about striker fired guns and why they might be more efficient, if you could dwell for maybe 2 minutes on efficiency in a little more detail, so that we get the real flavor for the for what I know what your answer is. But it's better to hear it with the accent.
Of course. No, so obviously because it's the condensed version of the class, normally we talk about every single gun type, and it becomes a lot more apparent why striker fire are more efficient. So let's compare a striker fire gun with a single action, double action gun, right? So striker fire has no external safety, right? The only safety, the safety that you can activate is on the trigger itself. Follow me. Still the same gun, no magazine, no rounds. So once I decide to move my finger from the seam from between the slide and the barrel, right? Because I've decided I need to engage and shoot, right? I only need to put my finger on the trigger. When I touch the trigger, I disengage the safety. Now I'm ready to shoot. When I press the trigger, because it is a consistent trigger pull, it's the same weight of trigger pull every time, there is less variables. I can be, more efficient, both when I'm training and also when I'm engaging a threat, right? The fact that they don't have a hammer allows them to keep the muzzle, the bore axis, if you will, lower. If it's lower, when I'm in my shooting position, the lower the bore axis is, the easier I can manage recoil, meaning the easier once I shoot, boom, the gun does this, the quicker I can bring it down, right? And so the quicker I can take my second, third, fourth, fifth shot as I need. Now, that's the striker fire. On a single action, double action, my first pull normally is in double action, meaning it's a longer trigger pull, right? Longer trigger pull, and the subsequent one are shorter. So in training, that's not very efficient because now I need to practice 2 types of trigger pull. In real life, again, under stress and so on, it is not necessarily probably the best thing for you. Because they have a hammer, the muzzle, the bore axis is higher, so it's harder to control recoil, which is going to make me shoot a little bit slower. In between shots, I might need to manipulate the safety. Let's say that I carry my single action, double action gun in single action with the hammer up. Now I have the safety, which kind of defeats the purpose of a single action, double action, but people are going to argue about that. So, I need to depress the safety, and it's one extra step. When we go into single action only guns, like a 1911, right? Again, that little extra step of the safety, I've seen over and over people fail to remember to take the safety off in force and force training when there is actual stress introduced into the training. Everybody can remember stuff when they're at the range, but when they're under a certain level of stress, it's a lot harder too. So I want to set myself up for success. I want to take away all the variables that are not helping me, right? And that's why we consider striker fire to be more efficient. When we break it down, slightly less efficient, it's a double action only gun, right? Again, double action only guns have a consistent trigger pull that is usually heavier. The muzzle, the bore axis is a little bit higher, so it's a little bit less efficient, but we don't hate them, right? Because there is not that many extra steps or those many variables, right? it is consistent within its system. The program for double action only would be, you know, they're a little less efficient in recoil management.
So yeah, let me actually just interrupt just briefly there. So for the notion of efficiency, the addition of, say, a grip safety doesn't change the efficiency calculation. So in a Springfield XD with a grip safety, it is an otherwise striker fired gun. The only thing that's changed is the fact that you've got to make sure you got a good grip, which you should have anyway. Does that feel
correct.
accurate?
Correct. You know, the grip safety just like the safety on the trigger, right? If you're gripping the gun, you're defeating the first safety. If you're touching the trigger because you're ready to shoot, you're defeating the second safety. And so it doesn't call for any extra steps on your part.
So I know we have an abbreviated class here, and I know this notion of efficiency is one that we dwell on for, I don't know, about an hour in the real class. So it's we'll put some links in the YouTube video and in the class so we can move on. There is an awful lot of material behind the notion of efficiency, and I want to go ahead and let you move on with the rest of the class so we can get done. Well, we're not going to get done in 9 minutes, but as close as we can.
All right. So we got 9 minutes left. Very well.
Well,
so,
9 minutes until the end of the hour. I think we said an hour and a half. So folks can drop off as they need to.
Yeah. So let's touch upon what we need to communicate to 911. Because that's a very important aspect of it, right? Because again, efficient communication, like, you know, will allow the 911 operator to send help quicker to our place, right? So we need to tell 911 where we're at, home defense, or your address. Not just your address, but also where you are in the house, right? We are upstairs in the bedroom. The bedroom is at the left back corner, you know, something like that. You want to tell them what's happening, right? We just woke up, there's a big noise downstairs, you know, we locked the door to the bedroom, but I think we have people inside downstairs, they're breaking things, they're, you know, what have you, right? Let them know what's going on. You want to let them know that you're armed, right? So we're in the bedroom, we're locked in, I'm armed, you know, and you know, can you send help, right? If you have a description of the threat, because you had a glimpse of them, you know, on the way back from the bathroom, you realize somebody's in the house, and oh crap, you're running back to the bedroom, you're locking, blah blah. If you have, you know, if you have seen the threat, you want to give a description of them. Maybe you have, you know, security cameras in your house, and you can look at your cell phone and let the 911 know exactly what the threat or the threats look like. A description of yourself, right? Hey, you know, I'm armed. You know, I'm in my bedroom.
Flip the easel page. You're on the previous page. The easel. The page behind you. Look behind you.
Yeah.
Flip the page.
Oh no! Well, we were going in.
Oh, I thought we'd already moved on. Sorry, my bad.
No. That's. I was going here, but because of the time compression, I want to, you know, explain the 911 thing, the communicate thing before we get to the skills. If you have a pet, if you have kids, if you have a partner, you know, you want to give your description. You want to tell, and I'm here with my partner. I'm here with my kids. There is my pet. There is a dog that is, you know, it's outside. Because when the cops show up, they will probably appreciate knowing that you had a German Shepherd with you or outside in the yard or whatever, right? So let's focus on that. Where, address, and where you're at in the house. What is happening? You know, describe what's going on. Tell them that you're armed so that the police doesn't show up and get surprised by seeing somebody there with a gun that they didn't know. And, you know, you don't want to give that kind of jokes to law enforcement. Description of the threat, if you can. Description of yourself and anybody that is with you. And then follow the instruction of the 911 operator as best as possible. Cool. Having said that, let's quickly look at a basic skill set, you know, that we would develop live if we were in the proper class. But first, we're going to talk about grip. Again, same beautiful gun, nothing in it. Grip. When I grip my gun, right, I want to grip it as high as possible on the back strap, right? when the gun shoots, wants to do this. So if I grip it here, if there is space here, it has more opportunity to jump. So if I go all the way up, I don't leave any space between the backstrap and my, the webbing between my thumb and index finger. That's going to be beneficial for managing the recoil. These three fingers wrap around, they're parallel to each other. The middle finger touches the trigger guard. Again, I want the gun, the end as high up as possible on the gun because it helps me to mitigate recoil, right? Now, the finger is somewhere under the trigger, preferably on the seam between the slide and the frame. This gives me a tactile feedback. I always know, I know I can feel myself there. The reason why we don't want the finger here is because under stress, if we get startled, we can have a grasp reflex, right? When we hold something, we want to clench down even more. So this can allow me to access the trigger when I don't need to, when I don't want to. Right? So if it's up here, the tactile feedback, I still have the grasp, I have a much lower chance to be able to access the trigger, right? Now, on the other side, the thumb is played as high as possible on the slide, right? This creates a beautiful spot for the support hand to go in. So the fat part of my thumb goes right here. Thumb is played in front of my strong hand thumb. And these four fingers just wrap around. The index touches the finger guard, wrap around over this strong hand finger. Now this gives me a proper grip, right? There's no light, there's no space between my flesh and the gun. And when I go out to engage, it allows me to manage the recoil a little bit better because I'm higher up on the gun. Particularly for new shooters, this is actually very safe. It's called the slide for a reason. It's gonna slide, it's not gonna cut your fingers, right? So you can shoot here, and this allows you to manage recoil, right? A lot better than if your thumbs are down here, right? There's a lot more opportunity for movement here than there, right? When we talk about grip, next we're going to talk about stance. So when I have my gun, right, and I'm ready to see if the bad guy comes through the door and so on, my stance is kind of what we call a natural stance. You know, when we get in a stressful situation, a dangerous situation, the natural response that the body has is to lower our center of gravity. We're going to bend the knees a little bit, and we're going to bend the hips a little bit. I don't know if I can modify this so you can see a little bit more. But basically, I'm bending at the knee, I'm bending forward at the hip. So now, when I go to full extension with the gun inside and parallel to my lateral side, I have both my skeletal system locked behind the gun, my muscular system locked behind the gun, and my mass leaning forwards, which in turn help me to manage that recoil. So our shooting stance is a matter of convenience. The most important aspect is for that gun to be inside and parallel with my line of sight, because I'm going to be focused on the threat, right? Particularly at bedroom distances, I don't need my sight. My brain wants to focus on the threat, both eyes open, because they want to capture as much information as possible about the threat. So we want to work with what the body wants to do anyway, because if I acquire a good kinesthetic alignment with the gun in and parallel with my line of sight, it stands to reason that with a proper trigger press, I can access the threat when I'm looking at, right? So both eyes open, arms at full extension, hands grip, and that's, you know, my most efficient shooting stance, right? If I'm not shooting, but I'm holding the gun, we have what we call our ready position, is the high compressed ready. So I want to have the gun in front of me, right? Pretty much between, you know, on my sternum, right? Elbows, arms are tight against my ribs. So this is actually a position that is very efficient, because if I need to present my gun, I just need to punch it out, right? So the gun moves only in one plane, right? One plane of movement makes it more efficient. Instead of being down here, I need to bring it up and hopefully not over traveling to address it and come back down, right? Secondarily, it's also an easier position to defend in case the bad guy makes it through, and, you know, before I shoot him, he's on me, so now I need to defend my gun, right? The other aspect of it is that I don't want to be waiting for the bad guy like this, right? Because that's tiring and start shaking. It's not very efficient. So here, it allows me to, let's say that I'm by myself, I can talk to 911, right? As I'm holding my gun. Obviously, I can put the phone on speaker and still grab it with two hands, right? But there is a high compressed ready position. There's a couple more advantages to it. You know, we reload here, we hear malfunctions here. That's a little bit, you know, beside the point for this class. Let me see. The other advantage of having really been dialed in into a shooting stance, so knees bend, hips bend, go to full extension, both eyes open, right? Is this allows me to put multiple string of fire on the bad guy quicker, therefore stopping the threat with the least amount of time, effort, or energy. All right, so I will stop it here. If we have questions and so on, if we have time, we can go on a little bit more, but let me know. How would you like to proceed?
All right, I think we need, other than Mike Ross being a bit of a, you know, funny guy in the chat, folks got questions, let us know. Raise your hands. We can go ahead and let you speak. You can just ask them in the chat. Eric Wooten asks, brands of self-defense ammo recommended. You want to talk a little bit about that middleweight, normal manufacturer kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, for that, like any reputable manufacturer, you know, that there's those you know, defensive, you know, bonded hollow point. Right now, the technology is such that, you know, you can get Winchester, you know, bonded hollow point, you can get Hornady, you can get, you know, a few others, and you're gonna have consistent quality, right? So my advice is, you know, try a few different grains, maybe see what works best for you. Because again, people focus a lot on, oh, you gotta, you know, shoot the most powerful round for your caliber, right? Not necessarily, because again, there's distances and so on. You know, you're gonna create a lot of damage. You know, so I'd rather you put more rounds on the bad guy because they're a little less power, but you can put 5 or 6 in the same amount that you would put 3 or 4 with a higher power cartridge.
Yeah,
So,
I believe the original advice that we had from Grant, who, you know, isn't here, so he can't defend himself, was middleweight for the caliber you're shooting in a named brand.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's exactly it. Like, you know, I'm using different words, but, you know, you don't need to go with the heaviest, you don't need to go with the lightest. You know, medium weight, you get the best, you know, the best of both benefits, right? But again, if you're a big guy, you know, you work physically, you work out a lot, you may be able to shoot the higher weight at, you know, with the same consistency. So it really is a thing that you want to try and figure out for yourself. But definitely name brand and definitely defensive hollow point.
Do you have any more slides or I'm sorry, I'm calling them slides, even though they're pieces.
Thank you. That's very good for my ego.
I do have a recommendation from the audience to just go ahead and if there is any more.
No,
look at that. He's actually made it through all his material, ladies and gentlemen. So
if you want, I mean, give me the question. Then if you have time, we can talk about.
I'm looking. Nobody's asking
Right.
questions. Apparently, you were so clear that everybody understands it perfectly.
Well, there was one question that I answered in the chat, but the question was, where do you aim?
Oh, very good point. Very good point. So a couple of concepts that I failed to bring up. One is defensive accuracy, and what we define as our you know, defensive accurate area in the body, right? So you want to aim for the high center chest. Now remember, high center chest is here, right? And on the range, we always shoot at 2-dimensional target, so it's always here, right? But in real life, I'm moving and so on. You may be aiming for here, and not necessarily get anything vital, right? Particularly when we are at 90 degrees to the door, to the entrance, the bad guy is going to be here, right? So this becomes your combat accurate area, right? So the high torso, from the back, from the front, from the side, right? So that's where you want to aim. reason is because, again, it's a target-rich environment, right? You got the heart over here, you got the lungs, you got the spinal cord in the back. And so we want to try to engage in this area. And in this area, we consider any shots that get here equal to any other, right? Would you rather be shot here? Would you rather be shot here? Oh, would rather be shot over here. But what if you're, tilted this way or that way? The way that the bullet travels within a three-dimensional object is kind of unpredictable. So we don't want to get stuck on trying to make the smallest group possible. We want to keep all the rounds in the combat accurate area, but as quickly as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then another question was, can you speak to night sights versus a flashlight, like a gun light versus a flashlight?
Yeah. So personally, I prefer to have my gun and my flashlight separate, right? And that's for my concealed carry mostly, right? Because I don't want to be looking for threats with a gun. It's not ideal. I don't mind having a secondary gun, a light on my gun, right? Because again, my flashlight may run out of battery at the worst possible moment. So now I still have something that I can use, right? But now remember, we're talking about home defense in your house, right? If you pay your electrical bill, you can turn the lights on, right? We're not going to look for the bad guy, right? If we are going to look for the bad guy, we are putting ourselves in a lot of jeopardy from the legal standpoint. I may have to move around my house to go to my kids' room. That's understandable. Turn the lights on. Don't make it more complex than it needs to be, right? Turn the lights on. Oh, what if the bad guy, now we're getting in the what if, right? Oh, what if the bad guy got the power before they came in? I don't know what kind of lifestyle you have, but that's quite rare. Anyway, in that case, have a flashlight on your hand and have the gun, move around with the gun with the muzzle pointing in a generally safe direction. Because remember, if they're going to look for your kids, you don't want to be looking for your kids with a flashlight that's on your gun. There is a lot of opportunity for making a terrible mistake, right? So if we didn't have any other options, all right. But since we have other options, right, that don't put us in any more jeopardy, how about, using those, right? And when we talk about using a gun, a flashlight, right, to engage a bad guy, there is a lot of BS techniques, like, this, you got this, you got like, this. I studied them all, right? I fell for it as well, so don't feel bad. But the problem is when you go into force training with lights and you are the bad guy, I get shot so much on the hands, arm, and so on because people shoot towards the light. So I want the light as far away as possible from me when I look for the bad guy, right? So I want to keep it out here and use it, right? But if the bad guy shoots at the light, I stand a much lesser chance to get hit in a vital point, right? This, I really don't like, right? Neither. Also, because all these things, like people justify by saying that, it gives you more support, so that, you can still have two hands on the gun and so on. Not really. This is not really doing anything for your grip, for managing recoil, right? It looks cool. I give you that, right? So we have seen that there is not any increment in accuracy by doing the funky stuff, right? So I might as well train shooting with my strong hand and keeping that light very far away from my vitals, right? Because listen, like if you see this, where do you shoot? You shoot where the light is. If I keep the light there, not ideal. So keep it up, move it around, right? Because the light is to identify, the gun is to shoot. Now, if you have enough light to identify the threat, you don't really need night sights, right? Night sights are okay, but again, particularly when we're talking about home defense and so on, for one thing, the chance that you're going to use the sights is very limited because under stress, your brain focus, both eyes open on the threat. Your brain doesn't care about this little piece of metal 2 feet in front of them.
Oh, we can't hear you, boss. We can't hear you. Didn't hear a word you just said. Say that again.
All right. So one of the reasons why I don't think that night sights are essential is because under circumstances of home defense, right? When the distances, again, I don't know where you live, right? But distances are pretty tight, pretty short, pretty close up. Under stress, I'm gonna be focusing on the threat with both eyes open, gunning in parallel. I don't need to use my sights in order to engage the threat accurately. And it's not just that I don't need to, but my brain will not care about a piece of metal that is 2 feet in front of me, when there is a bad guy there charging me with a gun, right? So I'm gonna be focused there. That's why it's really important to have that good kinesthetic alignment where wherever I'm looking, the gun is looking too. Right? So now when I access my trigger and engage the threat, I'm there, I'm on the threat without wasting time going back looking for my sights. Now, if the demand for precision increases, then I need to look for my sight. But that's gonna be a much slower event, right? Say the bad guy has an hostage. The bad guy is shooting at me and is behind cover. Now I might need to slow down and use my sights. But I use my sights when I need to, not as a default, because we're talking about defensive shooting, right?
And that's obviously something that we have not been able to sort of demonstrate and cover in the 1 hour and 11 minutes that we've been at. I got one more question from the folks. Actually, I got two more questions from the folks. We'll get to the second one in a moment. Staging when you have multiple entryways, recommendations along those lines, right? So,
yeah. So basically, depending on like if you have multiple entryway in your house or in your room, whichever that might be, right? The concept is 90-degree off to the point of entry, right? So, okay, I have a door on this side and I have a door on that side. If I'm reacting to something, I'm reacting to a noise, I'm reacting to somebody trying to break in, I know where they're trying to break in, so I set myself 90-degree to wherever they're trying to break in. Does that make sense?
yep, I think so. Hopefully that answered the question. It may have been more about where do you put the gun from a safe perspective as well?
Let's say, yes. So you need to figure out, again, you know, there is no reason, if you have the resources, there is no reason why you shouldn't stage in a quick access safe, a gun in the bedroom, a gun in the living room, a gun in the kitchen, right? That way, wherever you're at, you're way quicker, more efficient to get to that firearm, right? Now, if resources are a limitation, then you can choose to maybe stage it in the center, right, of the home and take it to the bedroom when you go to sleep.
Let's see, I'm scrolling through this. Laser sights, how do you feel about them?
I don't mind laser sights, right? Laser sights are really beneficial when you're shooting from an orthodox position. You know, you may be behind something and so on. You may not be able to get to full extension, right? So now by activating the laser, you know where the round is going to go, right? It may have a limited value as a deterrent, but you know that's a lot of if, right?
Right. I think one of the objections was if you're using a laser, won't they see the laser? Well, they'll see the light too. But if you want to give a quick moment on that.
Come again?
If you're using a laser, won't they see your laser and then shoot the laser?
Well, I'm not planning to stay on the laser for 5 minutes. You know, I'm not looking for the bad guy with the laser, right?
There you go.
I'm seeing the bad guy, I'm pointing and I'm shooting, right? So there is a much quicker, you know, much quicker time between engaging the laser and taking the shot.
All right, we have one more question. We have one more question that is, it's a, you know, it's a complete, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but they want you to say Beretta.
Beretta.
Hey, Ed, there's also another question I think is relevant to the class. How do you know when to stop shooting?
So that's a very important question, right? Nowadays, we have had so much research in this field that we know that there is a lag of time between we recognize the stimulus to start to shoot, right? Between we recognize the stimulus and we start shooting, and between we recognize the stimulus and we stop shooting, right? So as a principle, you want to stop shooting when the threat is not a threat anymore, right? Oh, you shoot them and they go down. are they still moving around down? You know, I could be down but not out, and you know, and still shoot you. So you shoot until you recognize the need to stop shooting. When that is, varies from person to person, right? You can then call expert witnesses at your trial that can explain very effectively why, you know, you shot so many rounds, right? And we see it in force on force. A lot of people, the least amount of training, the more they run to slide lock. Because again, you have to remember that it's an extremely intense emotional experience. And so you're gonna shoot and you're gonna shoot, right? You stop as soon as you can stop shooting if it's safe to do so. If that makes sense.
I think that covers just about everything I'm seeing in the chat. So if I didn't get to you, now's a good, Mark Greenspan. What do you want, boss? You got to tell me. You can't just raise your hand.
While we wait, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. If you want to speak, speak.
So, while we wait, another important consideration, if you are spending resources to
I was curious about over-penetration.
Oh, managed to get him on the audio. Sorry about that, Mark. Go on.
No problem. I chose a 38 special or a 357 revolver for home defense, and I used 38 special plus P's in it because I'm concerned about 357 being too loud, too powerful, definitely over penetration. And also the 9mm I have has like a thumb safety, and he kind of recommended no safety, so that's kind of why I've shied away from that. Mm-hmm. Would I be okay in, like, say, over penetration with like 38 plus P's, and that's still a big enough round to be adequate for the job?
Yeah, I think that, you know, when we talk about 38, especially the plus P, you know, that there is, you know, if they're bonded hollow point and so on, that the performance, you know, should stop at the threat, right? Maybe, you know, look into the, you know, again, the gel testing, it's an arbitrary test because we're not made of gel, right? But it gives you a good idea of what the, you know, chances of over-penetration that round may have, right? We think, like, you know, 38 special, you know, it's a very good round. You know, it's not a huge difference between, you know, a modern 38 special and 9mm and so on. So I think it would be a good choice, you know, and maybe like think about backstop and setting up your backstop where you limit any chance of over penetration, right? Because it also depends, you know, how long the barrel of your gun is and all that, you know, to
yeah,
make an accurate prediction.
We've got a member who runs ballistics by the inch who can give you an awful lot of data on modern 38 special, 357, 9mm, a lot of data on the rounds in terms of what their foot pounds, etc. are. Conventional wisdom, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to answer this again. Conventional wisdom is that, you know, most modern defensive pistol rounds have about the same ballistics. So your 38 is about the same as your 357-ish, is about the same as your 9mm, as long as you're dealing with the defensive rounds, not the, you know, not the normal target rounds, the defensive rounds. Those rounds tend to be all in the same range of, they're going to put a bad guy down if you put the targets on target. Or you put the rounds on target. Sorry.
That's all right. I know it's your language, so, you know, you're a little bit.
Yeah, you know, English really is hard.
Yeah. Now, one last thing, unless there's other question, but like I want to touch upon and I'm just getting to. So if you're putting resources into buying a gun, buying a quick access safe, training, right? You may want to put some resources in taking a medical class, like specifically a trauma class that deals with gunshot wound and stabbing and so on and so forth, because, you know, not for the bad guy. Again, bad guy made his choices, you know, is paying the consequences, but you may get hurt. Loved one may get hurt, right? So now, if you can actually help yourself, your loved one, while you're waiting for the paramedics and the police to come, is going to be extremely beneficial for you for the aftermath of the incident. So
yeah. I'll go ahead and add that we're going to try to do one online. Doesn't replace so just like this doesn't replace in-person training with a real firearm, with Al yelling at you like a drill instructor on the range saying, why are you doing it wrong?
I never yell.
You never yell. Yeah, I've heard it. It's not yelling; it's Italian. But we're also looking to make sure that we can at least give some basics for emergency medicine from some of the folks that taught at National around tourniquet use in general. But Al's point is incredibly important. Once this is over and you can actually visit with other human beings again, both we have classes. There are plenty of classes out there to go, and you want to sit in front of Al and have him teach you stuff. You want to sit in front of Al and have him teach you how to use a tourniquet if he's got that going that particular day. You want to sit in front of any one of our instructors that are doing this and learn those skills because they're just as important as the shooting skills. So, did I cover it, Al?
Yeah, yeah. And again, like when we're on the range, right? We're going to work on grip, natural stance, kinesthetic alignment, intuitive sighted fire, how to manage the recoil to have multiple string of fire, and also some multiple threat considerations. So the range version of this class is actually, you do quite a bit of work, end up probably shooting around 200-300 rounds. And it's still just the beginning of your journey to keep practicing and keep better.
And Al talks for another like 2 hours. So
in between things.
In between things. So I think that's it. I don't think there are any other questions. There's a number of oh, look, somebody's posted a link to the YouTube channel. I'll get this up on YouTube after I have a quick look at it, make sure he didn't say anything silly, but he didn't. And folks who didn't come can learn from the master. I want everybody to put their hands together and say thank you, Al.
Thank you,
Hold on, let me unmute you guys. Everybody's unmuted. You can make your noise. Make your noise.
Thanks,
Hey,
Al.
excellent, Al. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Al.
you.
I got my friend Mario over here.
You forgot your friend Mario.
Mario, say hi.
My first class with you guys, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna get it so that the next class you can maybe do in person. But we have a reloading class tomorrow. Al's got another class next week, and Al's got like 3 more classes. So visit the website, see what's on there. This time we promise that the links will work. So we're sorry about that. And thanks so much for coming. You guys have a great night. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Al.
Thanks, Al.
Bye-bye.
Next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
Ciao.
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 Great job, Al. Thanks so much. Oh, I didn't. I muted you. Great job, Al. Thanks so much.
Hey, I knew the mute was coming.
Yeah, the mute was coming. It wasn't on purpose. All right, have a great night. I'm stopping the recording, so we're done.
All right.